Well, hello everybody. My name is Gemma New. I'm music director for the Hamilton Philharmonic Orchestra. And today we are exploring the most beautiful and enchanting piece called Morning Song. And I'm so pleased to invite and welcome our composer and performer of this piece. We have our amazing principal second violinist, Bethany Bergman, and one of the most important and poignant voices of Canada's music today, Vincent Ho. Let's welcome them, everyone.
Hello.
Brilliant. It is so good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss this amazing piece. It's very small and intricate as a miniature work, not too long in duration, but it has a profound impact. And so I'd love to hear first from Bethany what you think about the piece and how you came to know about it.
Well, I was looking at a bunch of pieces for the concert that we broadcast in November. And when I heard this piece, of course, I really enjoyed listening to it. What I enjoyed was that it sounded so natural. It sounded like it just one thing flowed from the other, and it was something that I could really shape and give voice to. And the other thing I liked about it, of course, was that it has so much room for expression, and it was very and is very expressive as a piece. So those were the things that I was drawn to, and the huge range that is available in the piece. So dynamically, in terms of ornamentation, there's some very fast sort of sparks in the piece and some quiet, more tranquil, reflective moments.
Well, bravo on your performance in November, and we're just going to get a taste of it very soon. But before we do, let's hear from the composer of the piece, Vince Ho. Thank you so much for joining us, Vince. Can you please tell us, how did this piece come about?
Well, thank you for inviting me on this, and Bethany, fantastic performance in November. The piece was written while I was in Los Angeles, actually Glendale, California, and it was inspired by my witnessing of the sun coming out during the morning. And how it came to be was the night before I was out with some friends, and we were celebrating something, which I forgot what the event was. But we were out having fun, and I came home rather late or early in the morning, however you want to see it. And I was feeling rather inspired. So I decided to go to my studio and try to get some work done. From my studio, I saw from the window the sun starting to come out over the horizon. And at that moment, I just felt this moment of awe that just took my breath away, and I wanted to just sit with it for a moment, just to watch the sunrise with a cup of coffee in hand, and I felt inspired to just write something right there at that moment, more like creating a musical snapshot of what I was experiencing as the sun was rising, and so that was the inspiration that motivated me, this creation of the work. Now, this rarely ever happens. I mean, normally when I write a piece, it would take weeks, months, maybe even a year to write, because I'm just so picky. And it's every day I look at what I've written the day before, and I say it's not good enough, and start over. This was a rare moment where it was just pure inspiration. And it only took about an hour or two just to write. It was just, it was almost as if I was taking in that energy, that inspirational energy that the sun was giving me, and then channeling it through my creative process in musical form. So it was one of those pieces that just happened beautifully in a natural way. It was wonderful.
Wow, that's such a great backstory for us as we listen to this piece. And when I first heard it, I was in my everyday life studying, looking for new music and scores and everything. And I listened to your work, Morning Song, and suddenly felt a sense of calm. And I felt much more refreshed to go on with my work. So thank you so much for your music and for your performance, Bethany. Let's all hear it now.
Yay.
Thank you.
Oh, it's superb. Thank you, Bethany. And Vince, hearing this performance now, how do you feel as the composer of the work, and compared to when you were writing the piece late at night, that time so naturally, and now hearing this performance today, what is it like for you?
Well, I tell you, every time when I hear this piece, I feel one of a few things. Either I feel that it's taken me back to that moment when I wrote the piece, or it makes me think of the sunrise. And then when I hear Bethany play it, it's like I'm hearing it for the first time again. And the reason why is because she brought out in her performance a fresh interpretation with these nuances that I never even thought of. And when I first heard her performance, I thought to myself, my word, did I write this? There's no way I could have written something so beautiful like this. I mean, the way she played, wow. And so that's how I felt when I first heard it. And hearing this again, I was thinking, wow, it's like hearing it for the first time again. Just the beautiful nuances that Bethany, as the performer, brought into her interpretation. And that's one of the exciting things about being a composer is I get moments like that when I hear a piece performed with such a fresh interpretation that shows me new shades or new sides to the work that I had written that I had never even thought of. That thanks to the talents of the performer brought awareness to me. So yeah, thank you, Bethany, for this fresh interpretation of this piece. So
Indeed,
thank you for thank you for writing a piece that lends itself to the interpretation. It's quite beautiful and evocative. I really enjoyed the imagery that came to mind when I was playing it. So you saw sunrise, and because of the way you wrote the piece, I saw all those things that I imagined come with the sun rising. The sounds of the birds and the way the morning sounds so still and sort of just rises up out of a mist. That was what I heard when I looked at the music and was able to interpret these shapes you had offered.
actually, I'm glad you brought that up because when I wrote this piece, that's when it occurred to me that it was important to leave enough space for the performer to bring in their own interpretation, to bring in what they have to offer in their performance. Much like how a playwright writes a part for an actor and actress, they leave enough space for them to interpret how they want to portray the role. I mean, it gives them enough, I guess, flexibility. And so this was one of those pieces that was there's a lot of breakthrough moments when I wrote this piece that I'm reminded of when I hear the piece and as you're talking about the piece itself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you for filling in that space and bringing in your own interpretation of this work. So
let's dig into that a little bit. So you mentioned at the very beginning, Bethany, there's a lot of room for expression and personal expression and inspiration. And I wondered, as it's written, does it have certain leeway for dynamics or tempo changes that, Vince writes a line that gives a suggestion, but are there specific ways that he's given you freedom?
Well, yes. So some of the rhythm is written in such a way that it gets faster or it gets slower, but it doesn't indicate exactly how that rhythm is measured. Of course, there's the lack of bar lines and downbeats, which really gives us the freedom to interpret where the heavier and the lighter points are in the phrases, where those periods and commas happen when we're saying something. And because of those rhythmic freedoms, of course, while there's a suggestion for tempo, and there's a suggestion for where to slow up and where to slow down in terms of tempo, the rigidity isn't there. So it's to me it's very vocal, and it's very vocal in a natural way. If a singer were to sing something that was ornamental or melismatic, or if you were to listen to a bird, which is what it sounds like to me very often, you would never hear something that was strictly measured. It would always be something that was natural. So
Right.
that's how it sounded to me. And the way it's notated gives us all of that room to hear that.
And that's such a wonderful skill for a composer to have, to write music that is very clear for the performer while still allowing that freedom for choice. I mean, so Vince, you've talked about the inspiration of the sunshine, but I wondered, at the time of studying, you were studying in California, I gather, and so what were your influences musically at that time that came into this piece?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. At the time, I was starting to explore and research the distinctions between Western and Eastern musical practices and creativity. And so what you're talking about goes in line exactly what I was trying to capture in this piece and what I was studying. In a nutshell, prior to writing this piece, I was very, I guess you could say, Western oriented in the sense that everything had to be notated specifically as it should be. There should be no question as to what I wanted. But then when I was researching Chinese music and Eastern music, I found it was the complete opposite, where they try to leave enough space for the performer to interpret, so that that way they can give rise to their own interpretation. The Chinese music tradition for a lot of the instruments is that each player is expected to develop their own repertoire of techniques or riffs or gestures that they would employ whenever they perform a piece. And so each performance would be different. And so that fascinated me. That fascinated me because it was contrary to what I was studying at the time in terms of Western new music. And so I wanted to employ that. I thought, hey, you know what? That's closer to who I am as a player and as a composer, because I play the piano as well. And I love it when I see a piece that gives me enough freedom to just express myself, to make creative decisions, to make the interpretation my own. And so that was where this piece, Morning Song, was inspired from, was the principle of the Eastern principle of performance, where you don't give too much information. Just give enough to point the performer in the right direction and let them fill the space. In fact, one interesting thing I learned is that in many pieces in Chinese literature, it's almost an insult to give too much information on the page. And the reason why is because it suggests that the composer doesn't trust the performer's skills. And so that's why they don't put too much information. They don't want to insult the performer. And also, most of the times, the performers were of the aristocracy. So if they insulted the aristocracy, they could they could be banned from the from the city or something like that. So, but that was an interesting thing that I learned. And this, in fact, now that I think about it, even this piece has many harmonies and gestures that were inspired by the Chinese music tradition, as you probably could pick up on. So yeah, so now that I think about it, I should add that into the program notes. So
Awesome. And did you both speak with each other when, Bethany, you were working on the piece? Did you have any contact? No? So
no, actually.
purely through the music?
Yeah, it's just
the notation.
Through the music. I mean, there is one really beautiful recording of it, but I think I play it differently. I think
yeah.
I do. Yeah, it's a beautiful recording. It's just that's the only reference I had to it, and we didn't speak beforehand.
And for a piece like that, sometimes it's better that way. Like I said, it gives the performer enough freedom to interpret, and by not saying anything or having any discussion, it gives me the opportunity to hear what they can do with the piece, and also allows them to make it their own, which is what I love. I used to be the kind of composer where I was very rigid and micromanaging, or a bit of a control freak. Well, composer, control freak, they kind of go hand in hand. But in this situation, for this piece, it was I wanted to give a sense that I was hands off. I want the performer to just bring to the table what they want to say. I want to hear what their experiential history has to offer in their interpretation of piece. It's not about, I guess that's one of the reasons why it felt like hearing the piece for the first time. I wasn't listening just to the music that I wrote. I wanted to hear what the performer had to say. I wanted to hear what the performer had to offer, their history, their emotions, their expression, not just me. I wanted to hear them. So this is one of those pieces that, again, that that was part of the inspiration. So.
It does have that incredible balance of feeling improvisatory and free in the moment, but also bringing a wealth of experience and knowledge that you are sharing to the audience. And Bethany, I can't help but remember the beautiful, cherished memory that I have of you performing The Lark Ascending with the HPO not too long ago. Again, a little bird in the sunshine there. And it made me want to ask you about what influences you drew from your past and your experience with solo violin music, from Bach and onwards as you took on this piece. You said it's very cantabile and it's written so well to allow the violin to sing. But what influences did you have that you brought to this?
Well, certainly I did immediately think of The Lark Ascending. I did, because of these moments where you can hear, the world waking up, and you can hear those birds in their first moments of noticing what's happening in that morning. As far as what I would draw on, it's very hard to say when you have a background that's sort of full of everything, what specifically, other than, something that really is, to me directly evokes the same sort of imagery, what I would draw on. I don't know. I really don't. I know that I've been fortunate to have played a lot of new music. And, in that regard, I certainly knew what a lot of these things meant as soon as I saw them. And I also knew by looking at it right away that it was meant to be like, go, just do what you want. And so I can say that having done enough contemporary music, I was able to be able to see that more clearly. But I don't know that I would have a really good answer for that.
No, that's interesting, because I think Vince has a unique voice, in that it's your voice, Vince. I just having heard your music, and it's profound, it's beautiful, it's poignant, it's very always like expressive, and makes me feel not always relaxed, but just as a spiritual calm and strength. And so it's interesting you say contemporary music has this notation on the page, which would seem quite modern, in that we read it and think, yes, this is a composer of our time today, because we have similarities in the way that things are written. And yet every composer, we hope it's the goal for every composer to have that unique voice. That's something that is very special to their voice. And I guess this makes a natural segue to Vince to tell us a little bit about what you're writing at the moment, and what is in your mind as a composer of today.
Okay. Wow, that's a loaded question. I'll do my best to answer that. I recently finished for a book of short piano pieces that I wrote for my daughter, actually, who's 8 years old, and she's on level 4 piano. And it's 12 pieces, and inspired by the animals of the Chinese zodiac. And so I was just inspired to want to write 12 pieces that captured the personalities of these animals in musical form, but in their infant form. So you have like little dragon, or the gentle little piglet, and things like that. And I wanted to write just 1 or 2 page pieces that fit within her piano level. And so I just finished that, and it was such a wonderful process that I'm eager to write a second book for intermediate level, and then maybe a third book for advanced level. So that way, for me, I can trace each animal, quote unquote, growing up in musical form. So that was my recent piece that I wrote. I also wrote, believe it or not, another musical snapshot for solo violin. Again, one of those moments where I was inspired one afternoon. I felt, okay, I have to get this down. So I just wrote that. Now, in terms of, sorry, the second question was, but my contemporary music, was it, or I forget.
What's on your mind as a composer today? What are you thinking of creating? And
okay, if you had asked me that 5 years ago, I would have a list of projects that I want to do, and I would have a full answer to you as to what it means to be a composer today. Now, my answer to that is I don't know. And it's better for me to not know and just approach each day as a surprise and see where my inspiration takes me. Much like how these piano pieces were. It was just one day I felt inspired to write these, and I just thought, let's just run with it and see where it takes me. Oh, that's done. Let's see what the next project's going to be. And so I guess for me, the definition or what a composer's role is today changes on a daily basis depending on what I'm inspired by. As long as it's sincere to the process. I mean, I'm not goal oriented as I used to be back like 20 years ago. Now I'm more process oriented. So, which means that if I'm inspired, then I'm more. It's more important for me to be engaged in that process. Actually, better yet, it's more like a dance. 20 years ago, seeing a blank page was like getting into a boxing ring where I was trying to battle with every day's challenge and trying to force something onto the page. Now I come to the page and I see it as a dance where I see the challenge and I respond to that challenge, and the challenge responds back to me. And gradually we get into this rhythm of back and forth, and then the music starts to emerge and evolve. And then by the end of the period, something comes out of it. And so I find that the challenge or the process, actually, no, I say challenge, has become less as an adversary and more as a partner, where we're doing it together and seeing where it's going to take me. So I would say now, well, I don't know where this is going to take me, but hey, it's you and me find out.
It's what makes music so such a fulfilling profession, because we're learning something new every day. And Bethany, as you prepared this work, I mean, what goes into your practice schedule? How do you prepare for something like this?
Well, first, I want to say that I'm completely inspired by what you just said. Actually, that's a wonderful approach to doing something again, especially where we find ourselves now, where we're looking at these pages and we don't know what the end goal is, especially as a performer. That's a different dance than we used to do with our practice time. And so I love the idea, the way you're thinking about this differently. It's something I'm definitely going to come away from this conversation thinking about for sure.
Well,
yeah.
if you don't mind me saying, it goes in line with the piece Morning Song, and I mentioned that it was a breakthrough piece for me, and I'll tell you why, because it goes along with what you've asked, Gemma. Like I said, up to that point, I was very picky. I was very process oriented, and a piece I felt was not good enough unless it went through several rewrites, or if I had at least 5 existential crises. So I was that kind of a composer. Then when that moment happened, the sunrise, I decided to let that go. I had to give myself permission to just to be a human being, not a human doing at that moment. It was like the only best analogy I can think of is when you're with someone you love. You're there, you're right there, inspired, and you're just going with it. You're just going with the flow. You're not thinking what you want to achieve or the past. You're just enjoying that moment. And everything that happens is a natural flow of that energy that's being created at that moment. And that's how I felt at that sunrise. And that's when I realized, you know what, this feels good. I mean, when I had finished writing the piece, I felt, you know what, that's a unique process. You know what, I got to let myself just let go every so often. I can't control a lot of things. There are a lot of things I need to let go. So just be, and just be in the moment and see what happens. And since then, I have to admit, my process has become a lot more rewarding. And it's led to some very beautiful moments of creative breakthroughs for me that I would not have had I been that micromanaging, control-freak composer, trying to control every single element of my compositional process. And so I'd say, yeah, that's if I were to have advice to young composers, chill out, just be every so often, and remember that it's supposed to be a healthy process, not a destructive process.
As a performer, I'm sure, Bethany, when you look into a piece of music, you have to go through all the facts, what's going on here, and the structure, and what fingering am I going to use, and this is difficult here, this run, and how am I going to fix it? So it becomes quite mechanical, but you must have back and forth with the sense of maybe stepping back and saying, how do I feel about this? What does this mean to me? What am I inspired to do in the moment if I just let myself focus in a spiritual sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And when I'm practicing, like many musicians, of course, we have tools that we use, but even for a piece like this, one of the best tools for me was to use a metronome. So I knew what it was before I took that away. So, I played it at tempo many times with that metronome to understand where those shapes were. And then all of a sudden, breathe some life into it where you take away that shell. I'm sure there's there's an art analogy that, you start with an outline and then you color it in and then you remove that outline and then you're left with the picture. And I think, whenever anybody is given a gift of a piece that they can interpret anyway, and it's beautiful and says something to them, the process is of course always more enjoyable, and you find ways to work on these things, and finding those shapes. I remember looking, where is it going, how is it actually shaped?
Yes, it's something that people think a score is so black and white, and yet there's many, many gray areas that is supposed to be there. It's a good thing because we can then find the right moment with live performance. Every live performance is completely different, and it's due to the whole, our energy at the beginning and throughout the performance, and how we work together. So it is quite magical, and I can't wait till we can get back to live performance all together. As soon as we possibly can. And in the meantime, I hope you both stay safe and well. And thank you so much for joining us, Bethany and Vincent Ho. Thank you very much for being with us today. And
thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you. And thank you for your piece, Vincent.
Thank you.